Hi, I'm Diane Stepro, a librarian at Jeffersonville Township Public Library, and I'd like to talk today about recognizing and responding to fake news. I'm going to be talking about the malice test method, which is the method I use. There are lots of methods. You can Google any uh, library or college that has a method is probably going to be just fine. First, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what fake news is and who creates it. So, who does create it? Well, a lot of different types of people. Some people are just aiming to make a quick buck by getting people to click on their sites. It may even seem harmless. There was a time when a lot of college students did this, hoping to drive advertising to their sites by sharing social media stories that link to back to their websites. Um, and then they'd have advertising automatically show on their websites through Google, um, and then they get a paycheck without doing anything, really. There are also people who are building up and selling dubious products. Often these are vitamin supplements or something along that line, but they're things that, in most cases, that you don't really need, and competent authorities would recommend that you don't use. And they try to cast doubt on those authorities so that you wouldn't believe the people dismissing their flim flam. So, for instance, they might say that doctors and nurses are in a vast conspiracy to tell you that you really don't need to be eating the kind of vitamin that they're producing. And that way, if they get you to doubt the authorities, they can then manipulate you however they want. Um, so be very careful of those who are trying to cast doubt on those you've believed for a while. There are also a lot of people that are seeking to discredit honest authority in order to gain power. And the way this works is if, say, somebody is seeking political power, but they don't want you to find out their darker side, they would cast doubt on those who have knowledge of the darker side of their lives so that you won't believe it when you hear it. Uh, and uh, and that's a pretty effective way to gain power too, despite wrongdoing. People do that. They also sometimes just cast doubt on the other side, just make things up. And finally, there are foreign intelligence operations that are seeking to destabilize and disrupt nations, and that comes from a lot of different countries. Uh, at this time, the United States is under attack from several corners, but one major source of fake news attacking the United States is part of a retaliatory attack from Russia. And this started quite some time ago when an American businessman was run out of Russia so that his business could be taken by Russian interests. And a Russian lawyer named Magnitsky was trying to defend him in courts and was eventually arrested, tortured, and murdered for his efforts to defend the American businessman. Uh, the United States issued sanctions against many Russian businessmen who were involved in uh, this torture of and murder of this man and called it the Magnitsky Act. And so, in retaliation for those sanctions, we are getting really slammed with fake news that tries to destabilize our nation, in large part by making Americans distrust one another. What is fake news? Well, it's news that's meant to fool people into believing an untruth. It's not satire or and not humor, not Saturday Night Live stuff that you're meant to laugh at but not really believe. It's not something you disagree with either. It's a lie. Sometimes you can fact check claims by looking things up from reliable sources, but other times that's difficult. Say you're listening to reporting about something that just happened today. How can you verify that? You see a Facebook post about something that happened an hour ago. Well, it might not have hit the news yet, so you may not be able to verify it. But if you know some indicators of fake news, you might feel more confident in good sources and more reluctant to follow news from shady sources. One method for spotting fake news uh, is the malice test. So suspect sources that fail any part of the malice test. The malice test involves looking at where the money comes from, what the agenda of the source is, where the source is, what kind of images the source uses, what kind of content the source has, and the ethics shown by the source. Money. The first thing to look at is money. Fake news is always free. Some fake news sources don't charge anything for access because they make their money from advertising or selling merchandise. Um, or they push alarming clickbait stories to drive up their traffic or conspiracy theories. Many free sites are credible. You want to think about sources that have been around for a long time, but be wary of off-brand sites that seem to make all of their money from advertising and push stories that push your emotional buttons, that sell a particular product or that demonize large swaths of people. I'll get more into each of those things, but one money red flag is an opaque business model. If you can't see through the business model, you need to be suspicious. Um, so, real news sources are transparent about funding. They want to tell you how they make money. That's how they get investors, for example, if they're looking for investors. People aren't going to invest money on a large scale if they can't go to a financial source like the like the Wall Street Journal and find out. Real news sources are very transparent about funding. Um, they might sell ads, they might thrive on donations, they might require subscriptions. The leading report, which you see here, is a well-known purveyor of fake news and conspiracy theories. The stories in the leading report are relevant to real events, so they might not raise your eyebrow at first glance. But if you look down at the bottom of a page, you have to scroll way down in the leading report, you will find they do have some of the things you'd expect to find in a real business with a real business model that involved making news. They have links to things like the privacy policy, the terms of service, and contact us, like there are human beings out there ready to run this business. But if you click on those links, they lead to their clickbait headlines. They just go around in a circle, back to the headlines. They never take you to, for example, an address, a phone number, an actual privacy policy, an actual terms of service, information about how they make money. It's all not there. They're just hoping to distract you with their headlines so that you don't really think too much about it. They know that most people don't look at the links at the bottom. Look at the links at the bottom, please. Another red flag is merchandise. In many cases, you will find that fake news exists to sell things. and it exists to sell specific things. NBC has been around for a very long time, well before I was born, and I'm old. They make their money openly from advertising. They let you know that right up front. They always have. They had advertising in the news breaks when I was a kid. Um, but they published this story about the notorious conspiracy theory QAnon. Reputable news sources like NBC, ABC, NPR often have giveaways where they'll give you a t-shirt or a bag or a hat or something with their name on it. QAnon doesn't have giveaways. QAnon sells bags and t-shirts and hats to those who adhere to their theories. A lot of the people who dub themselves QAnon interpreters, who would tell uh, what people should believe, would market these hats and other paraphernalia, the t-shirts you see here, on places like Amazon and Etsy. Uh, and Amazon and Etsy could handle the commercial aspects of their profiteering, like payments and ordering. And for those who don't know, QAnon pushed the idea that Democratic politicians practiced child sacrifice and were protected by a vast conspiracy. And people believed this enough to wear that Q in public. Agenda. Real online news sources usually provide an About Us section or an editorial policy section that describes their biases and their motives. Fake news sources are less likely to reveal their motives or confess their biases. Look for editorial policy pages, staff biographies, or other indications that the stories are composed by humans. Just try to get it right. They might not always get it right, but they're trying if it's a real news source. The lack of transparency on social media makes hiding agendas really easy for purveyors of fake news, by the way. News sources, spies, bots, and trolls can hide behind the privacy protections of social media platforms. If you don't know who made a post and you're not sure the poster is an expert in the area the post is about, beware. So, if you see a post from some site that says, maybe American Heroes site and tells you to believe this or that, and you don't know who American Heroes Facebook page belongs to. I'm making this up, by the way, but you don't know who it belongs to. Be careful before you repost it. Check the facts of the story. You want to beware. So, lack of transparency is a big agenda red flag. You probably won't even find an About Us section on most fake news sites because they don't want you to know who they are. Newsweek is another site that's been around forever. It was a magazine long before it was a website. I used to subscribe to Newsweek and read it every week when I was in high school and college. They don't count on the audience knowing that, though. Look at this. Newsweek has a nice About Us page. And once again, you just won't find that on a lot of fake news sites. This one is a real site with a real About Us page that tells a lot about the history of the company. It has a bunch of links to the side about in the About Us section, and those links all work. I tested them. Um, Other news organizations that have been around for a while, you will probably be able to find their business model either on their About Us page or through a Google search. Um, and you can also find articles about them in many different types of publications. So, because these old, well-known, tried and true news sources have been around a while and they are businesses, the business publications are going to cover them. And you'll be able to find out who runs them very easily. Contrast that transparency with the runaround that we saw from Leading Report. Um, the runaround was a substitute for real information. We never really got down to anything substantial. There were just links that went to nowhere. Another agenda red flag is the existence to sell something. Channel 18 News exists to sell different types of weird uh, things like peptides and mushrooms for you to ingest. Um, and so everything on this site is pretty much something that you can ingest or leads to something that you can ingest. I mean, personal injury lawyer is not uh, any kind of mushroom supplement, but I guarantee you that if you click on that link, you will get down to something that they're trying to sell. Um, so it does have a look that suggests it's a local news site, Channel 18 News, but everything in that navigation bar says run. Some other newsy looking sites might try to sell you on opinions or policies that reflection would allow you to view as horrid. The next stop on the malice test is location. Real news sources can be anywhere in the world, but they're honest about their locations. Many fake news sites make an effort to hide their true locations, often only existing on social media platforms that enable them to hide where they are, hide their locations. Real news sources will make locations and contact information available. And so inconsistency is a big location red flag. If you see stories that suggest that the reports are coming from one place, but they're really coming from somewhere else, or you can't find out where they're coming from, it's an inconsistency. So the Washington Post, another old, tried and true news source, has an about page, and there's an address, and there's lots of contact information out there. It's really easy to contact the Post. I've done it. Um, and so by doing that, by putting that information out there, um, they're making us aware that they are a real site. Fake sites won't do that. Fake sites hide in the shadows. Images. Real news sources in this century use their own images, taken by their own photographers or produced by their own team members or purchased from a news service like the Associated Press or Reuters. Their images are going to be clearly labeled with informative captions, and they'll often credit a creator, like, there'll be a byline, photos by Joe Schmo. Fake news will steal images, and you won't get good captions. You won't get any credit for the creators. They often use recycled images to create a false impression, or they use AI without acknowledgement. So here are stolen and recycled images, a few things about them. Stolen images. You can search the image with Google Lens. If you suspect a stolen image, you might come up with multiple sites using the same image, and most of them without attribution. Somewhere back there, you might find an AP story or another national news story from which the image has been stolen. Um, and the places that credit the creator of uh, the actual image are more likely to be trustworthy. Some images are recycled, and a shady news source might have stolen it and then recycled it. They might have just found it floating around the web. Um, they might have actually created this image on their own at some time in the past, but keep reusing it. Um, and they'll be reusing it when the context isn't appropriate. Reusing a headshot of an editor over their column is acceptable. But if they are using a recycled image to represent something different than what it really is, that's a problem. So if a photo is supposed to represent a riot in Indianapolis, but all of the signs have Greek lettering, that's a big clue. Or if it's supposed to be Ukrainian soldiers misbehaving, but all of the writing on their uniforms is in English, or the cars on the street are all from a few years back at an image that's supposed to be today, it's likely recycled. If your goal is to fool the public for political or profit reasons, you're not going to pay photographers for real photojournalism day to day when there are just so many images out there that you can just grab. So images are a major place where you find this sort of uh, activity, and you'll see it a lot on Facebook and other social media platforms. Another type of problem you'll see is AI and edited images. AI images get things wrong. The ears don't match. The fingers bend in odd directions. Body parts and even background images appear mangled. Faces in a crowd are strangely similar in some cases. And you can train your eye to see these problems, but it takes work to do that training. Edited images also get things wrong, and they are often based off images you can find elsewhere. Are faces more dark and threatening when you find the image reused? Is the skin too slick? Sometimes editing leaves people with unrealistic body proportions, and that also is something you can learn to see is editing. This is an AI example. I made this myself. I used I used Google's, no, I did use ChatGPT. I'm sorry. I used ChatGPT to create this. This was my first ever AI image, and I'm actually kind of happy with it. But note that in the crowd, the same face is repeated many times. And there are just a few other faces apparent. Mostly it's this guy with black glasses and dark hair and about a day's growth out on his chin. Um, and they're all white people. So it's kind of a strange crowd. Um, just above Franklin's right leg, there's a face with two sets of sunglasses perched on two separate noses. I'm going to give you a minute to look at that. You see it? And there are other issues present throughout the image. Now, I will note that AI did a great job on Franklin, but Franklin is one of the most depicted characters in all of history. They had lots and lots of ChatGPT had lots and lots of places to look for images of Franklin to get this right. And it's pretty good at stealing things. Content is another issue, probably the biggest issue as far as um, what it does to people, because fake content makes people believe lies. But um, there are some clues, even if the content is real, you have some clues that you are on a fake site. Fake news sources steal content. Sometimes they'll steal real news, but it's a lot cheaper than putting reporters and cameras in the fields to come up with real news. One reason that a lot of fake sites are full of fake news, however, instead of full of uh, real news, is because they often steal from each other. So they grab content from one another rather than steal from real news sites. And the reason for that is because once somebody comes up with a story that's so shocking and such clickbait that people are clicking on it all the time, it's going to drive people to the site if you reuse that. And real news might seem more boring to people. So they might not want to go with that unless it is truly a very good news cycle. Um, Fake news content is often calculated to make you very angry. And there's a lot in the real news that makes me angry these days, and it's probably happening to many of you too. But fake news is often angering in a way that if you step back for a minute, you'll see that you've been manipulated. Fake news content does not come from reliable sources like archives and libraries, scientific organizations and medical organizations, and real reporting. So you're not going to see uh, where they got their information. They're not going to be transparent about that. And you often can't find a byline, that is, who wrote fake news. Or you might find the same story with different bylines on different sites. Here's one content red flag. A nebulous villain does something infuriating. Cancer industry not looking for a cure. They're too busy making money, reads one headline from an article shared millions of times on Facebook. Uh, and here's a pro tip: don't get your news from Facebook. Uh, if a Facebook article links out to another article in a reputable place like CBS or any of the well-respected news sources, go ahead, follow the link, but don't get your news from Facebook. And do follow the link. You want to make sure that it's real and not a spoof uh, of an article that's not really from where it alleges to be from. So this article was reported in an article about fake news from NBC News in 2019. The article detailed the year's most damaging fake health news. And you can see the goal of this article was to get people mad at someone hard to define. What is the cancer industry? It's not very clear. Uh, if you ask an oncologist or someone seeking cancer treatment whether anyone is seeking a cure, you'll likely hear all about their involvement in studies and the remarkable strides made in recent years. But this was clearly meant to make people mad. Another piece of fake news published in 2019, according to NBC, survey of fake news that year, urged people to use ginger, ginger, the spice, rather than chemo to treat cancer. My family should be immune to cancer forever. We eat a lot of gingerbread, if that worked. Of course, it doesn't. For both pieces of fake news, the goal was to sell unproven supplements. Would a fake news purveyor apologize if confronted by a group of cancer researchers? I wonder. Probably not. But a real news outlet will take responsibility for mistakes. Fake news is created in a responsibility vacuum. And the last section of the malice test is ethics. Fake news sources make their money by pushing our emotional buttons, especially the outrage button. They may call on readers or world leaders to engage in actions that don't align with our personal ethical values. They often make claims that can be disproven with historical and government documents, and they work to pit social groups against one another. One example of ethically troubling fake news: Russian authorities often falsely characterize Ukraine as a Nazi state to justify their war and pressure other countries into supporting Russian goals. Although the idea that Ukraine is a Nazi state doesn't hold up to scrutiny, there are fascists in almost every country, but Ukraine has remained democratic. Calling Ukrainians Nazis makes the war seem justified to anybody who believes Russia. It also pushes away nations supporting Ukraine who don't want to look like Nazi sympathizers to those who follow them. So it pushes away those leaders. Unsuccessfully, I might add, but it's something Russia has tried. Russia has also reported a lie that Ukraine was developing illegal biological weapons as a way to justify their attack. And if you circle back to content, I want to note that both of those stories were widely picked up by fake news outlets after Russia started them out because, hey, it's clickbait and it's free. Russia's just giving it away. So, how do you respond to fake news? A lot of people have asked me over the years, how do I save others from the clutches of fake news? I've got a friend or I've got a relative that just believes everything they see, and especially if it's wrong. Well, that can be really tricky, but I have a few ideas. I've been looking into that. Um, and I will tell you that there are lots and lots of articles if you Google just that. How do I save others from fake news? But the first thing is always take care of yourself first. Buckle up. Make sure you have it right. Consult those trusted news sources, the ones that have been around for as long as you remember. Stay flexible. Real news takes time to develop, and sometimes the best advice changes over time. So if things change, if you find out that what they believed was going on in a war zone yesterday, today they've more reporters have arrived and they've discovered that that's not really the case. Go with the new information and try to explain that to those who want to stick with with one thing and believe that all changes should be rejected, because people do tend to stick with one thing. Also consult libraries, archives, doctors, and other trustworthy sources to verify information. Read past the headlines and don't get sucked in by video or photos without context. A lot of fake news is shared on social media as photos and videos, and you really need more information than that to get anything substantial out of information. A photo by itself isn't extremely meaningful without some interpretation. And put your news sources through the malice test or one of the other myriad tests out there so that you know that whether to trust those sources or not. Next big step, if it's fake, don't share it to social media. If you aren't sure it's real, don't share it. If you know it's fake, don't share it, even to criticize it. Boy, that's a hard one. I used to do that a lot, but studies have shown that people see the news rather than your little bitty type saying what's wrong with it. And so they see this big, bold headline, and that's what they believe, not your little bitty type that they totally missed, explaining why the headline was fake. So just try to kill it. And also feeds the algorithms when you share it. So if you're sharing it and it's fake, then it's going to be shared more and more and more and more because every share makes the algorithms think, oh, this is something people really like. We're going to push it out there because if people really like it, they're going to see it all over, and they see it all over Facebook, then they'll see Facebook more often, and then Facebook can say it has more users or whatever social media it's on. So starve the algorithms by not sharing the fake news. And then also you're going to circumvent that human tendency to believe the first thing they see or the thing that's repeated the most. Then help fake news victims learn thinking skills. This is a hard one. You don't want to confront most people on social media. Some people you'll know who's open to saying, oh my gosh, you mean I shared a fake story? I'm so sorry. If you know somebody's like that, you can say, hey, Joe, that's fake. But for a lot of people, they are really, really, really offended if you call them out in front of other people. Um, Young people are often easier than older people, um, but be gentle no matter what age they are. If you're trying to help them, remember that your goal is to help, not to win one or score. So you want to start by striking up a conversation about motives. Is a website that promotes natural healing and peddling lots of exotic sounding supplements while urging readers to distrust family members and doctors. Well, that sounds like a bad motive. So try to get them to see that. Does a news channel making inaccurate claims about the environment um, come clean about its conflicts of interest? That news channel might actually be funded by someone nefarious or an industry like the oil industry. Does an outrageous claim in a news piece attempt to sow distrust where none has existed before? For instance, news pieces claiming that librarians are all pedophiles or that nurses get bonuses for pushing vaccines. Help victims see that some complete stranger on the internet is urging them to abandon faith in the people they know. Discuss the problems inherent in painting big groups of people like nurses or librarians with one stroke. Of course, there are bad people and good people in every group, but you want to help them see that big generalizations are not logical and that they should still trust the people around them. Try to talk to people in social settings. Try to start with fake news that you'll both recognize. And so you don't set yourself up for conflict as you begin this journey with them. Um, so, and remember the goal of fake news is to get the audience to stop seeing other people as people and start seeing them as inhuman enemies. And that's what allows them to drive in this wedge of distrust and sell their items or ideas. The next thing I want to talk about, and the last thing, is to block, report, recruit friends, and repeat. And I know you're thinking, I've blocked them before, and it doesn't seem to do anything when I block these fake news sites and I block people that are spreading fake news. Yeah, social media companies seem to ignore individual reports of malicious content, but lots of reports about the same post or the same person will eventually mean they have to involve a human reviewer. And when the human reviewer steps in, it's more likely they're going to take something down. And the more something is blocked, the less reach it has. So get your friends in on this. Get them all to block and report. If a lot of people are blocking a site, it's just not going to have as much reach as if Facebook could or other social media could still put it into their feeds. It's true that bad actors can often create new sites to peddle their trash, but it's also true that most people have to give up peddling that trash at some point. It's worth it to keep up the fight and keep after bad actors. If you want more, please visit your local library for more tips on recognizing fake news. And thank you very much.